Shouldn't you be contributing more around here if this is the kind of wife you're going to be? Maybe it's time you left, my mother-in-law snapped, her voice icy and cutting. Her gaze was unforgiving, and I was caught off guard by the sharpness of her words. Beside her, my sister-in-law added with a dismissive shrug, "You always seem so worn out, but nothing ever gets done." I turned to Matthew, hoping for some support, my voice shaky. "This is too much. Don't you think your mom and sister are being a bit harsh?" I asked, searching his face for understanding. His response was a punch to the gut. "I agree with them," he said flatly. "I'm overwhelmed with work, and it's becoming an issue that you're not helping out more at home. Things are going smoothly with the part-time help, but honestly, you're just slowing us down. Maybe it's time for you to find somewhere else to stay." I stood there, stunned, my heart sinking as I glanced at the three of them, their judgment heavy on me. Anger bubbled up inside, but I took a steadying breath and replied softly, "I need some time to think. I'm Lori, 35 years old. Managing both a career and household responsibilities has always been my reality, and I love what I do. I've worked hard to advance in the company I joined right after college. But lately, it feels like everything is falling apart." One morning, as I prepared for work, Matthew approached with a look of concern. "Lori, can you take care of this?" he asked, handing me a pile of receipts and bills. "The cafe's finances need sorting." I smiled, trying to deflect. "Sorry, I'm not great with that kind of thing," I replied. I met Matthew when he worked part-time at a cafe I frequented. After a few casual chats, we started dating, and eventually, marriage was on the table. Now, he owns the cafe, but despite his knack for business, he struggles with the paperwork and often turns to me for help. Sighing, my mother-in-law added, "Lori, I'm craving Chinese food tonight. Can you rinse the rice well? Also, Denise and the kids are coming this weekend, so we need to plan their meals." "Sure, I'll get to it," I said quickly, agreeing to her request, before hurrying out the door. I had hoped moving in with Matthew would offer a fresh start, but it only made things more complicated. Matthew soon suggested, "Mom's been lonely. Why don't we move in with her? She could really use the company." And now, here I am, living with his mother. To say she's not exactly equipped to maintain a household would be an understatement. After my father-in-law passed, my mother-in-law began living off his pension, mostly spending it on dining out or takeout, leaving all the housework to me. Matthew, holding on to traditional views, thought the domestic duties were entirely my responsibility, and I ended up doing everything. As if that wasn't enough, Matthew's sister, Denise, would often drop by with her kids, further increasing the mountain of tasks. Weekends that I hoped would bring some respite turned into chaos with kids to entertain and meals to prepare. Then, one day, Denise dropped a bombshell. "I'm getting divorced and moving back in with the kids next month," she said. I was speechless for a moment. "Really? Anything you want to say about it?" she asked. I found my voice. "That must be tough. When are you moving?" "As soon as I can," she replied. While I was shocked by Denise's news, I hoped that her presence would ease things. Maybe she'd help out with some of the chores. Reality, however, came crashing down. Denise, much like her mother, had no interest in housework. She spent most of her time on the couch, snacking and watching TV. I couldn't help but wonder if her avoidance of chores had a role in her marriage falling apart. Now, with more people to feed and more kids to pack lunches for, my workload increased. My hopes that Denise would lend a hand quickly faded, and my free time vanished. At work, things were ramping up too. I started early, stayed late, and came home exhausted, only to be met with a disorganized, nearly impassable living space. The mess made it even harder to relax. And of course, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law always had something to say. "Is dinner ready yet?" or "Why are you so late?" were their constant complaints, and I couldn't escape the pressure as soon as I stepped through the door. The stress began to build. "Lori, there's a mountain of laundry. Don't use your busyness as an excuse," my mother-in-law reprimanded. Inside, I wanted to shout, "I'm doing the best I can," but I remained silent. Before I could respond, my sister-in-law chimed in. "It's bold to stand up to your mother-in-law, Lori, but for the kids' sake, you should try harder to make homemade meals. Her words stung. Exhausted, I weakly retorted, if you have so much free time, maybe you could help with the chores once in a while? I'd even overheard Matthew's sister joking, since Matthew owns the cafe, Lori doesn't have to work, right? Maybe she should focus more on home stuff. Their words piled up, suffocating me under the weight of their expectations. One night, at my breaking point, I decided to confront Matthew. I've been overwhelmed lately, and neither your mom nor your sister is helping with the chores. It's really hard, I said, hoping he'd see my side. Matthew's response was icy. Lori, you're not criticizing our family, are you? He asked, his tone sharp. I took a deep breath, explaining, that's not my intention, but it's really tough to handle everything alone. If you could help out occasionally, it would make a huge difference. His response was dismissive. I'm busy managing the cafe. Housework is the wife's job, right? His lack of support left me feeling both frustrated and helpless. But then, a spark of determination ignited within me. I'm not going to let this be my life, I thought, my resolve hardening. I grabbed my phone and opened my favorite shopping app, adding some much-needed items to my cart. By the time I was done, I felt a small victory, an act of control in the chaos. That night, I went to bed feeling accomplished, ready for the next day. A few days later, my delivery arrived, bringing with it a new washing machine, a robotic vacuum, and a rice cooker. Each item felt like a lifeline, offering a bit of relief in the whirlwind of chores. When I set up the new washing machine, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law walked in, surprised. Wow, Lori, that's a fancy washing machine. The old one still worked, didn't it? My mother-in-law asked, her tone skeptical. I smiled, unbothered by her judgment. The old one was getting slow. This one works faster and better, I replied calmly. They quickly shifted their attention to the robotic vacuum and other gadgets. I've upgraded a few other things too, I said, showing them with a hint of pride. These appliances were now my allies in keeping the house running smoothly. Lori, can we talk? My mother-in-law's voice was sharp as she motioned for me to follow her into another room. I followed, sensing a confrontation coming. Why did you buy all these things? She asked, her tone frosty. Do you really need all these gadgets, or is it just to make your life easier? I stayed calm. I thought it would help everything run more smoothly around here. I carefully chose my words as I spoke, but the tension in the room was palpable. My mother-in-law clearly wasn't pleased with what I said. Aren't we depending too much on technology? She asked, and my sister-in-law, who was standing nearby, waved her hand dismissively, siding with her. Even though they were opposed, I remained firm. The appliances I had purchased were outdated, and Matthew was preoccupied with his store. I figured upgrading a few things would make our home more efficient. Matthew gave a nod but didn't take a stance. Maybe we should focus on saving more, he suggested, his tone carrying a subtle criticism. My frustration started to bubble up. Maybe you're right, I muttered, though I was boiling inside. But are you considering what we actually need at home? My mother-in-law's voice became sharper, and I froze. I am, but I'm just really tired, I confessed, feeling trapped. Enough, she snapped, her disbelief clear. I can't believe you're part of this family, my sister-in-law added, her words dripping with contempt. I'll take care of Matthew, we don't need you here. I turned to Matthew, hoping for some support, but he just gave me a cold, indifferent look. I get where Mom and Sis are coming from, he said, trailing off awkwardly. As they left the room, I sat there, feeling the weight of their judgment. However, their harsh words only strengthened my resolve. The appliances I had bought were essential, not only for running the house smoothly, but for my peace of mind. When I looked at Matthew, my heart sank. He flashed me a cold smile. I've got my business, so I make the calls on how money's spent, but living with someone who spends without thinking is tough for me. His words stung, but I held my anger in check, silently counting to 12 before responding. He continued, his voice cutting. By the way, that new part-time girl at the store, she's more attractive than you these days. Maybe it's time you found your own place. A wave of fury washed over me, but I controlled it. I took a deep breath and replied calmly, all right, I'll look for a new place. Finally, you get it, he said smugly. I'll feel much better without you around. That night, Matthew signed the divorce papers. And I left with only the essentials and the documents in hand. Nobody stopped me. I couldn't help but wonder if they had ever truly cared. After the divorce, I found a chic apartment and started anew. Around the same time, an unexpected promotion to section manager came through, a role I had hesitated to take because of my family situation. I dove into the challenge with enthusiasm and found a new sense of purpose. One busy day, my phone rang. It was my former mother-in-law. I ignored the call, thinking we had no more ties to each other. My new life had begun, and I wasn't looking back. A year later, on a quiet weekend, my phone rang again. It was my former mother-in-law. What could she possibly want now? I picked up, cautious. "Hello, is something wrong?" I asked. "Lori, I finally got through. I wasn't sure you'd answer after all this time," she said, her voice trembling. "It's been a while, what's up?" I responded, keeping my tone neutral. She hesitated. "How's your new life?" "Great," I replied cheerfully, masking any tension. "I love my new place, and work is going well. I even got a promotion, and I'm enjoying the independence." "That's good to hear," she said, her tone softening. "Lori, would you come back home?" I was taken aback. "Why?" "We're struggling financially," she admitted. I couldn't say I was surprised. "I had a feeling," I said cautiously. "Matthew's cafe is only making around $22,000 a month, right? Without anyone else in the family working, it's got to be tough." "You know about that?" she asked, shocked. "Yes," I said. "I did the books." Matthew pretended his business was thriving, but he didn't understand the real numbers. She seemed shocked. "You knew all this and didn't tell us? We had no idea you were doing so well in your job or contributing so much to the household." A sense of satisfaction washed over me. I was contributing over $55,000 a month. That's how you all survived after I left. The truth was, I had been covering for Matthew's business losses, and he had never once acknowledged it. Now, the truth had hit them. "Lori, please come back," she pleaded again. I sighed. "How's the cafe doing now?" She exhaled deeply. "It's on the verge of closing. The part-timers keep quitting." I couldn't help but smirk inwardly. It's hard to keep it afloat with his management style, isn't it? His pride is getting in the way. He doesn't know how to run things. How many women would put up with that? There was a long silence before she responded, her voice weak. "I didn't realize how difficult housework would be with 3 adults in the house. How is it so chaotic? What are Matthew and Denise doing?" Exhaustion colored her voice. "As for Matthew, he's been lazing around. His staff keeps quitting, and sales are down. When he found out, he just sulked. He used to spend the store's money freely, and Denise doesn't help out at home. She even gets an allowance from me." Her voice faltered. "Living off just my pension for the 3 of us is really hard." I couldn't resist a bit of sarcasm. Denise once told me I wasn't needed because she was there." "Please, Lori," she begged, "we're in real trouble. Living on just my pension is tough." I responded firmly. "I'm not going back to that house." "It must be hard living with all that baggage," she said, her voice sounding lost. I almost felt sorry for her. Just as I was about to hang up, she seemed to want to say something else. "Lori, I'm really sorry, can you reconsider?" Her voice was drained. I paused. Could we ever be around each other without resentment? Was it really that hard without me? I asked calmly. After a long pause, she sighed. "Yes, there's an issue with the property tax. We might have to sell the house." The call ended, and I sat in reflection on the family dynamics I had left behind and the new life I had embraced. "I see," I said, not wanting to be involved anymore. "You'll have to figure out what to do with your family." I ended the call and blocked her number. As I sipped coffee from my favorite mug, I felt the peace I had gained. A few months later, I passed by the cafe where Matthew worked. It was quiet now, no longer the vibrant place I remembered. I felt a twinge of nostalgia as I saw it had closed down. While wandering the old neighborhood, I passed my former in-laws' house. To my surprise, there was a sold sign. An old neighbor told me they'd sold it quickly and moved to a small apartment nearby. The place was full of loud arguments, and rumors about garbage smells had started spreading. It was clear things weren't going well for them. But as I looked at the old house, I couldn't help but wonder why they hadn't tried harder. A lot had changed, but I was living each day to the fullest. Recently, a handsome coworker admitted his admiration for my hard work. We started dating, and I was excited for what the future might hold. If I marry again, it will be for real happiness. I thought about everything that had happened and felt a rush of excitement for the future. Thanks for watching, see you in the next video, stay amazed.